Thank you very much. My name is Chinsembu. I'll be presenting on the transformation of higher education in Zambia. I will give a brief about the need for transformation. I will also briefly talk about the historical aspects of higher education transformation, and then I'll later on go to talk about the transformation and the correct type of higher education that we all desire. First of all, there is a sense of powerlessness about the state of our higher education system. There are a lot of complaints. Even as I sat here, I'm receiving complaints from parents, from members of the public about some of the activities that are going on in your higher education institutions. So there is anxiety. Government is also anxious because government is putting in money, especially in public higher education institutions. And the government would like to see some tangible results. However, there will always be this feeling that higher education is not delivering the right type of education that we desire in our country. So when you walk around, you see all these economic challenges, you see all these social problems, you see all these ethical issues. Everybody is pointing towards the wrong type of higher education that we have. However, there is still the basis that the best economic policy is education. And this basis is especially very important for this government because many years ago we had already realized that the best economic policy is education. You can fine-tune this further to actually say the best economic policy is higher education. And the hopes of our country, the hopes of our nation are on the shoulders of all of you here to provide the best type of higher education that can respond to the enormous challenges that we face as a country. But still, there's still the feeling that higher education is not doing enough, and that our system of higher education is a highway to nowhere. There's still this genuine feeling that our system of higher education has not taken us to the destination of prosperity that we desire for ourselves as a country. So the higher education system that we have is actually a highway to nowhere. So there are many issues that we have to digest. The first is that we are all providing higher education. And perhaps some of you are doing it for profit. Perhaps some of you are just creating higher education institutions that are human factories, that just churn out graduates in the ways of even elite that create the diploma disease. So we do not want just to build a system of higher education premised on the diploma disease. So we would like to think that there must be some aspect of relevance to the higher education that we provide. And that is our main entry point. We want the higher education that we provide to be of relevance to the needs of the host society. And so we are grappling with a lot of issues here. One of them is perhaps that the system of education that we have was just inherited. That it is a Eurocentric system of higher education, and maybe that is why it is not able to advance the solutions that we desire for our country. So perhaps we need to decolonize. And so there's a whole school of thought now about the decolonization of higher education. And this is coming from the Afrocentric theory, which is now very dominant in our higher education arena. So we want to change our system so that we tailor higher education to provide practical and meaningful solutions to our society, to our nation, and not just for students to pass exams. So again, we go back to why did we have to have a higher education of our own? And we always go back to the works of Professor Lamek Goma, because he's a luminary, and we all look forward, we all look towards him, because his message still rings true. So we want to build a system of higher education. We want to build a university, for example, that must follow the truth, and that all of us here must provide the lead in making sure the voice of the university is heard, in making sure that we develop solutions that will be meaningful to develop our country. So we want the university to take the center stage. We would like the university to take the center stage, to lead the way, to light our feet with knowledge, and to provide us with the knowledge solutions that we desire. But the problem has been the guilty silence in our institutions. So again, many of the terms that we would like to hear from the universities, to hear from our colleges, to hear from the experts that are in these institutions, many times we don't hear their voice. But we hear the voices of people on social media who are spreading propaganda. So the university has been carried down by propaganda from social media. And the university has become complicit in this guilty, what Professor Lamek Goma called the guilty silence of the universities. Now, why should we have the guilty silence of the universities? Many of the time, university professors and lecturers and support staff, they're just worried about how much they get. They are concerned more with material wealth. And they are concerned more with their titles, the title of professor. So they have developed a culture of academic pomposity and this culture of comfort. And that culture has made them to disengage from the many and important issues that they should be solving. This is, again, in contrast, because the quiet enjoyment of conditions of service in universities is propagating this culture of science. So we see two contrasts between Professor Lamek Goma and Professor Angleston, when during the 90s he spoke to the quiet enjoyment of our conditions of service when we were at the University of Zambia. Some of you could perhaps remember those words. Now, but we have a much bigger problem for our higher education sector, and this is graduate unemployability. Many of the graduates that we are producing are not employable. So we would like to find out what exactly can we do to increase our graduate employability. And this is important for the graduates to be able to make a contribution to the economy. So the higher education system has, especially for public higher education institutions, government is worried that these institutions are a bottomless pit for public money. So government would like to see that the graduates that come out of these institutions are able to contribute to the economy. For example, the president wants the economy to be doubled by the year 2031. So how will these graduates that you produce contribute to doubling the GDP? So these are some of the questions that we need to have at the back of our minds as we try to think about transformation of higher education. So the quality of graduates is being questioned. It means that there's something profoundly wrong about our higher education system. Again, you hear people talk about the fact that our graduates are actually half-baked. And this has been going on for a long time. It is not just now that you are being accused of producing half-baked graduates. I'm saying you are being accused. But when I was a lecturer at Hunza, we were being accused in the 90s. So this problem has always been there, that graduates are half-baked. And at that time, we used to make a joke that perhaps they have actually not even reached the oven. So these are some of the issues and perceptions that you attract. As you walk around, they point a finger at you, oh, that is the guy that is producing half-baked graduates. So we need to correct that perception. Now, how are we going to do that? Obviously, we must begin to think about reform. So I'll briefly talk about the history of higher education reform. Again, because we cannot go further into the future without looking deeper into the past. So a little bit of history can help us to understand from where we're coming from and create a momentous point that we need to change course. We need to change course and move in a different direction. So, where are we coming from? We are coming from a past that has already been characterized by several reforms. But bear in mind that many of these reforms have not worked, and that is why we are still in this problem. So the first era of reforms was in 1977 to increase access. And to increase access to university education, government created Unzador, which is in Quito. The University of Zambia Ndola campus was part of the University of Zambia. So that was the first effort of reform. The second effort of reform came in 1992, after liberalizing the economy. Higher education provision was also liberalized, so that we begin to provide private sector participation in the provision of higher education. So, from 1992, the Minister of Education was allowed by law to register private universities. So again, that created another problem. And this is the problem of the corner shop universities. So many of you are being accused of running corner shop universities, where you just have a house and then the following day it is a university. Now, I used to use this term myself, that we have corner shop universities. And now I'm the Director General of the Higher Education Authority. That practically registers corner shop universities. So what should I do? Perhaps that is why we are here. Because there are many factors that now come into play. And we need to still correct this problem of corner shop universities. Now, why is it being called a corner shop university? The answer is still coming back to the quality of graduates. So, the problem that the private sector participation in the provision of higher education has brought is the fact that private sector is driven by profit. So there is a very fierce, effort, there's a very deliberate effort to market So there is a serious marketization of higher education because private sector is driven by profit. And so this fierce marketization of private institutions brings about the problem of quality. And we need, for us as a higher education authority, we are paying attention to the problem of low quality graduates. So you are allowed to provide higher education as a private higher education institution. You are allowed to make profit. You are allowed to market, but we all understand that the privatization of higher education, driven by profits and driven by fierce marketing, will always result in the problem of quality. So from as early as 1992, the issues of quality had already begun to ring in our heads that we need to do something about quality. So now we have these private higher education institutions, and again, many times they are predatory. They are predatory in nature. They are like lions. They move very fast. And in the few months that I've been around, you can see that the predatory private university industry is actually a horrible accident waiting to happen. So every time I'm driving around in Lusaka, you see the names of the private higher education institutions, and there's something going on in my head. There's always something going on in my head. There's a concern that is always ringing in my head. First of all, it is the names. The names are very interesting. And these names always have me worried. They always have me worried many of the times because the names always tell me that this job that I have is very, very important. It is very, very important. So the predatory private university present to us a moment to reflect. And perhaps you may think that because we have this excitement for degrees, you can imagine that the excitement for degrees should make all of us to be happy. But it makes some of us to be very worried because it represents a very important crossroads. It represents a very important crossroads in the provision of quality higher education. Then we have the third era. This came in 1996. The third effort of reform, which came around 1996. And this is a time when I was a young lecturer at the University of Zambia. And there was a new policy direction from government, namely educating our future, which again was premised on increasing access and participation. But very important, it also included the aspect of quality and relevance of a higher education. At this time, we were still grappling with debt as a country. In the 90s, we were still in the heated efforts. And I remember writing a newspaper column in the Weekly Post that was titled "Education in a Country on its Knees." Education in a country on its knees. The most important aspect in this third era of reform is that the aspects of quality and relevance were still coming into play. So as early as 1996, the aspect of quality and relevance of higher education was already being recognized by government. As early as 1996, the aspect of quality and relevance of higher education was already important to government. And then we came into the Bobby Commission of Inquiry. Many of you who were at the University of Zambia, because the University of Zambia was facing a lot of issues, problems of mismanagement, then staff and student unrest, harmonization of salaries with the region, the government instituted the Bobby Commission of Inquiry. And one of the recommendations from the Bobby Commission of Inquiry stated that the quality of education in the university depends on the presence of a critical mass of professionals who are skilled individuals who constitute the academic staff. Without significant attention to retention, motivation, and commitment of this critical mass in the university, the problem of quality in the core functions of the university is bound to persist. This is the Bobby Commission of Inquiry, and they still also had to come back to the issue of quality, that there is a problem of quality in the core functions of the university. So again, as early as 1997, we already had, as a nation, a document that was speaking to the problem of quality higher education. As early as 1997, the problem of quality higher education was already prominent. And then in 2006, we developed the Vision 2030 document. Again, the Vision 2030 document speaks to the problem and the need to improve quality of university education. Vision 2030 also speaks to the importance of improving quality of university education. And then government begins to think, and going further in 2013, government then passes the Higher Education Act, which created the Higher Education Authority. So the issues of quality become very important, very significant. They come to the attention of government, having all that historical background, but the turning point was in 2013 when the Higher Education Act number 4 of 2013 was passed, and that led to the creation of the Higher Education Authority. Then in 2019, the National Higher Education Policy, a very important document, also recognizes the need for quality of education as well as the relevance of higher education. So notice the trend. From quality, we are now moving to relevance. Why? Because we need higher education to make a positive impact to the lives of ordinary people. Remember that the University of Zambia was built by donations of chickens and so on. So we need to make sure that these higher education institutions produce the solutions that we need to solve the problems of ordinary people. And that is why government is now shifting, it's moving from quality, now we are going to relevance. We need to combine both of them. Both quality and relevance are very, very important. Both quality and relevance of higher education are very, very important. And they become very prominent. Quality and relevance become very important terms as we sit here, as we design the curriculum, and as we move towards reform and transformation. Both quality and relevance become very cardinal in the provision of higher education, in the provision and in the architecture of the different academic programs that you are developing. The fourth era of an effort of reform came in 2019, as I said, But this led to the amendment of the Higher Education Act of 2013, and this amendment was made in 2021. And this amendment, the 2021 amendment of Higher Education Act, then creates this one basket regulatory regime. So all the regulatory efforts and all the regulatory functions for higher education now fall under the Higher Education Authority. But notice one most important amendment, and that is the creation of the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. And this is because government would like universities to undertake important research that will produce knowledge solutions to drive the economy. So the role of a university is not just to teach students to memorize facts, but we want universities to produce new knowledge. This new knowledge should be converted into goods and services that will help to eradicate poverty, that will improve the livelihoods of our people, that will provide new knowledge solutions in the different aspects of national life. So the government is attaching importance and amplifying on the aspect of relevance of higher education by creating this position of Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. So we want universities to be more innovative. And I'm emphasizing this so that the private higher education institutions, all of you here from the private higher education institutions, you should create this position in line with the Act. You should attach more time and resources to research and innovation. You should not just be teaching in the classroom, giving students degrees and they go. We want to find out how many peer-reviewed papers have you produced in a year? How many projects are you conducting in the community engagement? How much of your knowledge from your private higher education institution are you converting into goods and services that will drive the economy, that will help us to double the economy by the year 2031. So, in line with the Act, we would like you to create, just like we have created the units and the Directorate for Quality Assurance, we would like you to transform in that direction, to place significance, to place resources on research and innovation. And then we move to the 8th National Development Plan. And the 8th National Development Plan, which is titled Social Economic Transformation for Improved Livelihoods. If you go to the section for higher education, you see that it reads that with regard to university education, while more universities have been established, there is a weak regulatory framework. There is a weak regulatory framework. And because of this weak regulatory framework, that's why the government recalled me to come from Namibia to here, to come and help to strengthen, so that we can strengthen this weak regulatory framework. So we are going to strengthen. So there will be some measures that we are going to implement that will help to strengthen, to make sure that our regulatory framework becomes stronger than it is now. And then it also goes on to say that this weak regulatory framework has led to the compromise in the quality of university education. So, notice the link between a weak regulatory framework and low quality of education. It means that our work is very, very important. But as I said, instead of just focusing on regulation, we also want to focus on capacity building. So we are going to do both. Hopefully, we do not close you down, but hopefully will increase the quality in your higher education institution. I also want to emphasize that the problem of quality is not just in the private higher education institutions. The problem of quality is also present in the public higher education institutions. And we are focusing and we are taking a closer look on both public as well as private higher education institutions. So part of the transformation that we are going to see will begin with the transformation of the Higher Education Authority itself. So we are restructuring the Higher Education Authority to strengthen its functions. And that is important because we must strengthen our own strengths within the institution before we can strengthen the institutions that we regulate. So we are conducting a restructuring process, and hopefully this restructuring process will also help us to develop better capacities to improve quality and regulate the institutions that are under our mandate. So we begin again to pay particular attention to issues of higher education. We begin to pay particular attention to issues of infrastructure, especially in our old public higher education institutions, such as the University of Zambia. And the Higher Education Authority is the advisor to the minister on any aspect of higher education. And one of the aspects that we have taken up is to advise the minister on issues of infrastructure. And many of you that have come from the public higher education institutions, you will already have noticed that we have communication about our efforts to make sure that we have a correct picture about the type of infrastructure that you need. A few weeks ago, the Directorate of University Education was in Kawe. They spent a lot of time talking about the problems of infrastructure. So government is worried about the dilapidated infrastructure in our public higher education institutions. And government is also worried about the type of infrastructure that we have in private higher education institutions. But we are happy to note that many of you are making tremendous efforts in putting up modern infrastructure. Private sector, private higher education institutions are now building very nice modern campuses, very good structures. I do not want to mention names, but those of you that have not yet put up resources to build modern infrastructure, we are giving you a chance to put resources together to build, so that you can even build structures that are much better than the 2 or 3 that we have already seen. As I said, I do not want to mention names, but the minister has been to open some of these wonderful campuses that have been built by the private sector. And we are excited about the infrastructure, the amount of investment. We are excited about the amount of investment that we have put up in developing these excellent infrastructure. So one of the conditions that we give is that you must have a campus, you must have a piece of land, and you must have some kind of development that can lead to your own infrastructure. So we are particularly interested in infrastructure because that is where you are producing graduates. who will have relevant and employable skills. This is, again, very cardinal, because we would like to run away from this notion of a corner shop university. If you build a nice campus, if you build modern infrastructure, very, very good, very, very good campus, very good classrooms, with toilets, so that students can have these good facilities. That always makes us very, very excited. And we are encouraging each and every private higher education institution to put up these modern buildings so that we can reduce the notion and perception of a corner shop university. So, it will be very easy for me to register a very good private higher education institution. It's a binary decision. It is very easy for me to register, but it is also very easy for me to not approve, to reject the registration of a poorly put up higher education institution. It is very easy for me to approve something that is very good, and it is also very easy for me to reject something that is very poor. So it is a very simple binary decision that I'm going to take. Again, because I would not want to put my name to an institution that is not of high standards. And everyone is waiting for that. So the higher education space is going to be tightly regulated. You are going to enter into an era of, and a space of very tight regulation. And I'm going to make sure that you feel the importance and you execute this mandate of quality higher education. We must feel the importance of quality. We must emotionally feel it, that we are not just providing higher education just for the sake of a diploma disease, that it is a human factory, you just collect money from students, you give them certificates. No. It is not going to work like that anymore. And we are going to enforce this aspect of quality so that we improve the standards of higher education, so that higher education is able to contribute. It's able to contribute to make that important contribution to our economy. Higher education must improve to the extent that we produce quality graduates, relevant graduates with employable skills who can create their own employment, who have knowledge, entrepreneurship, and who can contribute the necessary skills for themselves as individuals, to create employment opportunities for themselves, self-employment, as well as for these graduates to be useful to industry, to be relevant to the needs of stakeholders, and that these graduates are able to contribute to the economy. So again, we are going to have to increase the involvement of stakeholders, stakeholder involvement. So going forward, we will not approve programs that have just been seen by two stakeholders. No, two stakeholders. No. The other time I was looking at one program for religious education. They have just sent this program to two churches along the street. And then you have all these big bodies, mother churches, they call them, and this program has not been seen there. So you just select two papas along the road, and then you send the program to us. No, we are not going to approve that. So their stakeholders quite okay, but we want to do things properly. No, we must do things properly. So if we send the problem back to you, it is because we are concerned about the number of stakeholders as well as the quality of stakeholders that participate. Because we want to make the programs demand-driven. We want to make the programs market-driven. We want to make these programs to be as relevant as possible. Okay, so we need a new type of higher education, and therefore we need reforms. And these reforms must produce graduates that have relevant and employable skills. So at the moment, our system of higher education is still a little bit dubious. Our system of higher education is still dubious. Why is it dubious? Because it is not producing the skills that we need to drive the economy. So in fact, the economic problems that we face now are as a result of a bad higher education system. The economic challenges that we face now are as a result of a badly designed higher education system. So you see the importance of all of you here. So when we complain about load shedding, what have you done as a higher education institution? When we complain about drought, what have you done to produce smart crops? When we walk and see the poverty levels in our country, what have you done to help uplift people from the trap of poverty? What knowledge have you contributed? So we just sit there in our offices, we design programs, we bring students, we teach them, they go. No. We must target this higher education to solving problems in our community, in our nation, and in our society. We must target higher education to make sure that this higher education is able to provide solutions to the many challenges that we face as a nation. And that is the most important premise for reform. We must reform our system of higher education so that this system of higher education becomes relevant. So it is more than a quest for relevance because we need to make sure higher education takes us to the future that we all desire for ourselves as a nation. But at the moment, our system of higher education is built on a weak foundation. At the moment, our system of higher education is built on a weak and fragile foundation. That is why the government has now implemented the reforms which the minister talked about. We want to correct the foundation. So we are again working hand in hand with primary school education, secondary school education, and government is taking steps to make sure that we create a strong foundation for ourselves so that the higher education that you provide is able to function properly because you are receiving learners from a good system of primary and secondary education. So some of the reforms that we've done in the past, some of these reforms have been political. You see, at one time we moved from basic to secondary school to high school, then we went back again. So many times the reforms that have taken place in education have been political, and many times these reforms have been convoluted. They have not produced the desired results. So we still go back to doing reforms at primary and secondary in order to create a strong foundation for higher education. Again, the problem of infrastructure is one of the issues that has contributed to a weak foundation for higher education. Many of the primary schools and secondary schools, they don't have the correct infrastructure, they don't have labs, they don't have computers, and this creates problems for higher education. So government things right from the source. Government is implementing reforms in order to cure some of these problems right from the source, hoping that by the time we get to higher education, we have a strong foundation on which we can erect our higher education system. So, in essence, we now have to deconstruct and reconstruct the entire system of higher education. So, in essence, our role now as a higher education authority is to help to deconstruct and reconstruct the entire system of higher education. We must put down the old system and build a new system. So we have an enormous task, and that is the reason we want to work with all of you. We want to work with all of you in this effort. So this effort is not just for higher education authority. This effort of deconstructing and reconstructing a new system of higher education is not just for government. So we emphasize that in doing this, in deconstructing and reconstructing this new system of higher education, we also must engage with the various stakeholders. So as you develop your programs, you must engage with stakeholders. There must be stakeholder input so that you can get to a new system of higher education that is targeted, that is customized, and that is designed to solve the needs of our society. And we can only do that if we involve all the stakeholders in the design of new programs that you offer. So we must gear this new system of higher education towards national development. We must rebuild and create a new system of higher education that is responsive to our needs. A new system of higher education that is not politicized. A new system of higher education that is not politically charged, but a new system of higher education that brings about, that increases academic rigor, that increases erudition, that increases scholarship, and that increases knowledge for development. So we want to build a new system of higher education that is built on the need to produce knowledge for development, knowledge for national development. So we must balance the financing of higher education by balancing two facts that are in tension. One is that education is a private good, and two is that education is a public good. Our government is always balancing these two aspects. Government is always trying to balance the fact that higher education is a public good, and also the fact that higher education is a private good. And that brings a lot of tensions in budgeting and in the financing of higher education. That brings about the aspect of cost sharing, because higher education is a public good as well as a private good. So the politics of higher education financing will always come into play, especially with donors, the World Bank and many other donors. They'll bring a lot of models about the financing of higher education. But we know what we want to do for ourselves. And we want to avoid as much political excitement and as much confusion as possible when we are looking at reforms in higher education. We want to avoid as much political excitement as possible. We want to avoid as much, we want to avoid confusion as much as possible when we are examining this aspect of higher education reform. So, to undertake higher education reforms, we need weight towels on our heads. We need to have cool heads to undertake the task of reforming, deconstructing, and reconstructing the system of higher education that we desire for our country. We must have weight towels on our heads. We must have cool heads. We should remove emotions, and remove excitement, and remove politics out of it. We must look at the greater picture for our country. Where do we want to go? Where do we want higher education to take us as a country? And that is a very important premise from which we should begin. So, higher education should create the future we all want. That is clear in our vision. That is clear. It should be clear for all of us. Higher education should create the future we all want for ourselves as a nation, for ourselves as a people, for ourselves and for our children. They must find a system of higher education that works for us, so that the challenges that we face as a country invites then all of us to question the traditional views of the higher education that we are receiving. The problems that we face right now as a country, the challenges that we face, invite all of us to question the type of higher education that we are receiving. It should invite all of us to question and begin to build a system of higher education that should work for us. And this is where, perhaps, indigenous knowledge systems can also come in. Indigenous knowledge systems can also help. We cannot build a good system of higher education that is divorced from our indigenous knowledge systems. We cannot build a credible system, a new credible system of higher education cannot be built without a strong foundation, without looking at our own indigenous knowledge systems. So there must be a hybrid. There must be a hybrid, and it is perhaps important that as you go back after this workshop, you also begin to design new programs for indigenous knowledge systems. In South Africa, many of our colleagues in universities are offering Bachelor of Indigenous Knowledge Systems. And these are graduates that work with chiefs, these are graduates that work in local communities, and these are graduates that work in district councils. They work with the local people in order to create a bridge between the knowledge that is external and the internal knowledge that we already have in our communities. To create that bridge of knowledge is very important for assimilation of the ideas and the knowledge solutions that you design. So we want universities to think about policies. We want all of you to think about policies that bring about the inclusion of indigenous knowledge system into your teaching and learning, into your research, so that we can build solutions from what we already know. So higher education should create the future that we all desire for ourselves. And in so doing, in using, for example, indigenous knowledge systems, then the university will not be divorced from ordinary people. We want the university to be engaged. We want the university to be fully engaged with the poor. We want the university to create knowledge solutions for the poor, so that the poor can feel the importance of the work that you do. They can only feel the importance of the higher education that you provide if you are able to help them solve their problems. So community engagement, all of you should have those aspects of community engagement where you bring your knowledge to bear on the poor. We want your knowledge to have beneficial impact on the poor in our communities. Now, we are operating in a very difficult financial space, especially for public higher education institutions. The resource envelope is always small, and as I said earlier, it is difficult for government to balance these aspects of financing. So one of the areas that should drive transformation is the fact that we are operating in a physical space that is very difficult because of the small resource envelope. The other aspect is that higher education has failed to bring a winning mentality to the many challenges that we face. So this is another aspect. This is another reason that we want to, this is the reason we also want to transform our higher education system. We want higher education to bring about a winning mentality, to bring about a win-win knowledge-intensive solution that can help to uplift our people from poverty, that can help to build and reconstruct our economy. So the many challenges that we face as a nation give us, who are working in this space of higher education, give us the responsibility, to channel our higher education towards finding solutions for our country in order to create that winning mentality, for ourselves as a nation. So the dream of Professor Lamek Goma to form a citadel of knowledge and an academic paradise, that dream of Professor Lamek Goma is what makes all of us here to march towards the future that we all want, that we will get there. Using higher education, we will be able to reimagine a future for ourselves as a country, a future that is prosperous, a future that creates wealth for ourselves, a future that will reduce the percentage of the poor in our society. But we can only get there if we have this desire to reform the higher education that we have at the moment. But the functions of higher education are still in tension because the effectiveness of the higher education that we have, for example, as a tool to fight poverty, as a tool to create health, we are still grappling with that challenge. We are still grappling to find the correct mix. We are still grappling to find the correct type of higher education that can fight poverty and that can create wealth. And as long as we have those challenges, the need for reform of higher education, the need for transformation of higher education will always be prominent, will always be very important. The need to double the economy by 2031 makes us to think about a new type of higher education that will help us to reach that goal. The need to turn ideas into goods and services. The enormous need to convert knowledge. The enormous need to convert knowledge into goods and services creates the agency for reform. The need to convert knowledge into goods and services creates the agency for reform of that I was reading the other day. It clearly states, depending on the quality of education that our youth receive, they could be either an asset or a liability. Now that touched me. Are you creating liabilities or you are creating assets? Depending on the quality of education these youth receive, they could be an asset or liability. So you see the importance of the correct type of higher education. It is right there. The type of higher education that you provide can either create an asset or it can create liabilities. I didn't write that. I found it in that report. I think many of you have read that report. And as I read that, I began to think, am I an asset or a liability? And so many of the times we blame, we blame government. We blame government for load shedding. We blame government for drought. We blame government for everything. But the solutions are right in our own institutions. We are creating liabilities for ourselves because we are providing a wrong type of higher education. So we need to create the correct type of higher education, and we need to create a type of higher education that is demand-driven, that is need-driven, and a type of higher education that is responsive, that responds to the needs of our people. So we must re-engineer and reconfigure the entire system of higher education. We must reconfigure the entire system of higher education so that it can deliver, and so that it can deliver value at scale. We need this higher education to deliver value into our own lives at personal level and also into our national life as a nation. But the problem has been that we have a lot of standalone institutions that are not working together. So in the design of our public higher education institutions, many of them are duplicating the same functions. They are duplicating the same courses that they offer, and they are duplicating the same degrees that they offer. But we would like to see a differentiation. And one of the things that we are going to do during this new journey of transformation is to make sure, especially for public higher education institutions, that they have flagship programs. We want them to have flagship programs that can make them to stand out, to differentiate themselves, that they are good in this particular program, instead of duplicating different programs all over the place. We want them to differentiate in order to reduce on duplication. We want to cause differentiation. So our new role as a higher education authority will be to cause differentiation instead of causing duplication of these academic programs. So we want to create a whole. We want to create a system that works together, that cooperates together as a whole, as one unit, by making sure that these institutions that we have, or new institutions that we create, speak to each other. The functions should be in such a way that we are able to deliver value at scale. We have to deliver value at scale. We also want to have a homegrown curriculum. We want to have a homegrown curriculum that is relevant to national and global demands. We want to have a higher education system that creates multivalent skills founded on indigenous knowledge systems. So we want to reconstruct new structures, new institutions, and new curricula that respond to our needs, that respond to the needs of our people, that respond to the needs of someone sitting, living in the village. We want to create a bridge between the knowledge from other cultures to the knowledge in our own cultures. And that is very important if we have to speed up the process of economic development. Because people in the village must start from somewhere. They cannot just adopt the new technologies that you bring without examining the knowledge systems that they have been using for several decades. So we want to create a system of higher education that recognizes multi, intra, and transdisciplinary skills. We want a system of higher education that recognizes the need for multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, intradisciplinary, and transdisciplinary disciplines and skills, so that we are able to utilize every aspect of knowledge. We want to move from theory to practice. Yes, basic knowledge is important, but practical knowledge is even more important. So we want to move from theory to practice. We want to produce students that have problem-solving skills. So as you design your programs, you must have that aspect of problem-solving. We want to produce graduates that have problem-solving skills. We want to produce knowledge-intensive solutions. We want higher Bloom's taxonomy. We want to develop cognitive functions that help us to solve real-world problems. We have a lot of research questions that we are going to ask as we are going to undertake these reforms. We are going to re-examine the quality, relevance of our higher education system. Remember, we've been talking about the quality and relevance, but we are now bringing in a third aspect. And we are going to start program viability audits. We are going to embark on program viability audits. So if you are in a public higher education institution and you have been teaching the same program because the lecturer has been there since 1970 or the professor has been there since 1980, it is the same program. Is that program still viable? So we are now going to start conducting program viability audits. And the reason is simple. We want to advise government, we want to advise also the institution that you work in, whether this program, we want to advise the management, whether they should phase out this program or not. Because if it is not viable, then it should be phased out or it should be transformed. So we have the option to phase out certain programs which are not viable, or we also have the option to transform those programs that are not viable. So we are going to embark on a new wave of audits, and these will be the program viability audits. Perhaps this will start next year. We will invite you to look at the tool that we are going to use for program viability audit. We shall be inviting you to examine the tool. We shall pilot the tool with you. We will get input from you, and this tool should come into force Early next year, we'll begin to conduct program viability audits. Program viability audits. Very important if we have to customize and tailor our higher education system towards the most significant and pressing needs that we face as a nation. The programs that we offer must be viable. So we are going to do a transformation, and that is our desire. And this transformation is a risky undertaking. Transformation of higher education is a very risky undertaking. It is a very delicate undertaking, very fragile, but very important if we must recreate and make a new system of higher education that is responsive to our needs as a nation. So our dream is to transform and overhaul and reconfigure and redesign and re-engineer for ourselves a new system of higher education that is responsive to our needs. And that will mean jettisoning some of the curricula that are no longer relevant, and that will also mean discarding of some of the programs that are no longer viable. So we want transformation to increase the value of higher education. That is the most important reason that we want to transform. We want higher education that is of value. We want to transform in order to increase the value of higher education. We want to transform in order to increase the contribution of higher education to the economy. We want to transform in order to increase the value of higher education in our political sphere. We want to transform in order to increase the value of higher education in our social sphere. Many of the times, the deficits that we see in our economy, the deficits that we see in our political sphere, the deficits that we see in our moral life are because we have a dysfunctional system of higher education. The moral dilemmas that we find ourselves in, as a matter of fact, this country is now in a moral emergency. Our country is in an ethical emergency. And that is because along the way, our system of higher education lost the most important ingredients that can help us build a society that values morals, a society that values hard work, and a society that values ethics. So we have, someone can just, just give a tender to this engineer, and the engineer is receiving tenders and is not building the bridge. So did they teach this engineer ethics, morality in university? Perhaps not. We want to encourage you to put up courses in moral and ethical behavior right at first year. And we hope that you will see the importance of this, that you should introduce courses in moral and ethical behavior, which should be compulsory for all first-year students that enter your institution. We want to encourage you, because we will not dictate to you what programs you want to put up, but our role is to encourage you to put up such programs. At least one compulsory module or a course in moral and ethical behavior, so that we can correct some of the deficits that have become inherent in our society today. So we want you to take and to come on this journey with us to transform and increase the value of our system of higher education. We must all have this strategic intent to transform. We must have this goal and this target in front of us that we want to develop a new system of higher education. So many of us have developed a high-risk appetite for transformation, and we encourage you to develop that appetite for transformation. We implore you and we beseech you to develop a high-risk appetite for transformation, so that we can place teaching and learning within your institution. We must place the teaching and learning and research within our national context. You should place teaching, learning, and research within our national context to tailor the functions in your institution towards providing the much needed solutions that we want to solve the most urgent challenges that we face as a nation. But there will be some backlash against transformation. There will always be waves and tides that will swim against our efforts for transformation. But you should not give up. And through our interactions with many professional bodies, we have come to learn. The other day, my director and I were in a meeting with our colleagues from HEA. This is a professional body. They provide very good programs in accounting. But as we talked to them, they began to realize some of the deficiencies that they have in the type of programs that they offer. We were encouraging them to link some of their programs to what we need in our local councils. We need accountants. We need accountants in our schools. We need accountants in the universities. But they do not have these linkages that connect their accounting degrees and accounting program to the needs of our people, to the most important and pressing needs of our people. So these challenges that we have are not just in private or public institutions. Even in the programs that are being offered by professional bodies, some of these programs still have to be re-engineered and to make this, in order to make these programs become relevant to the needs of our nation. So the risks of transformation are very high, but we must take on these risks in order to transform our higher education. So we need to shift our mindsets, and we are going to have to cause tectonic shifts in the way we think in order to reconstruct a new higher education architecture that is targeted at the most pressing challenges that we face as a country. So we should just move away from, it is not just about the excitement for degrees. So the education that we provide should not just excite you because you have increased the enrollment. No. That should not be the excitement. The real joy, the real excitement will come when you provide the correct type of higher education that will change the lives and transform the lives of the ordinary citizen. That will change and increase the value that this knowledge has created new value in our society and in our country. So the excitement should not just end at increasing enrollment. The excitement should not just end at graduation ceremony. The excitement, the real excitement, should come when we have produced a graduate, that is useful to our country. We are also going to be taking a closer look. I talked about program viability audit, but we are also going to be taking a closer look at the way you promote academic staff in your institutions. You already have the guidelines for promotion of academic staff to the rank of associate professor and professor, but many of you are not following these guidelines. We are going to visit your institutions to check how you are promoting academic staff to these prestigious ranks. We all know how to become a professor, how to become an associate professor. The guidelines are clear. The criteria are clear, and you must follow these guidelines. If you do not follow these guidelines, we are going to blacklist your institution, and we are going to take you to task, and your programs will not be accredited. If you do not follow the guidelines for promotion of academic staff to the rank of associate professor and professor, if you are cheating, if you are just awarding these titles to people who do not deserve them, you'll be blacklisted and your academic programs will not be accredited. So please do follow the guidelines, because we do not want to create an atmosphere where an institution is cheating to students, is cheating students. But if you stand in front of students using the title of professor, but you do not qualify, then you are lying to the students. And that is exactly where the problem of quality comes from. It starts from there. That is one of the aspects where the problem of quality starts. It starts from the fact that an individual who is less qualified, an individual who is not a professor, is masquerading as a professor. And that we are not going to allow. So if you have given yourself a title of professor, drop it before we come. If you have just awarded yourself because you formed the university, you founded the university, now you are a professor. No. That is not how you become a professor. So if you have just given yourself that title, and then you are walking around at the shopping mall with a t-shirt professor at the back, no, that is not it. We are not going to allow that, and we are going to be taking a keen eye on all the academic staff in your institution who are using that title of professor. And I warn you, if we find that you have promoted someone to the rank of associate professor or associate professor, but that person has got even no single publication in Google Scholar, we are going to blacklist your institution, and we are not going to accredit those programs. So please, when you go back, do the right thing. Just write the letters nicely, and then the people start using their genuine titles. We want people to use their genuine titles. Do not masquerade. So from now onwards, professorial appointments of deans, we are going to take keen interest to make sure that individuals that occupy these are senior academic ranks all over the world. So you cannot cheat about it. There's no way you can cheat. There's no way you can use the title professor and you don't have publications. No. We are not going to allow that. So just do the right thing, drop the titles before we come. Thank you very much.